Chapter 25. Postscript. In behalf of the dignity of whaling, I would fain advance naught but substantiated facts. But after embattling his facts, an advocate who should wholly suppress a not unreasonable surmise, which might tell eloquently upon his cause, such an advocate, would he not be blameworthy? It is well known that at the coronation of kings and queens, even modern ones, a certain curious process of seasoning them for their function is gone through. There is a salt cellar of state, so called, and there may be a caster of state. How they use the salt precisely, who knows? Certain I am, however, that a king's head is solemnly anointed at his coronation, even as the head of a salad. Can it be, though, that they anoint it with the view of making its interior run well as they anoint machinery? Much might be ruminated here concerning the essential dignity of this regal process, because in common life we esteem but meanly and contemptibly a fellow who anoints his hair, palpably smells of that anointing. In truth, the mature man who uses hair oil, and less medicinally, that man has probably got a quaggy spot on him somewhere. As a general rule, he can't amount to much in his totality. But the only thing to be considered here is this: what kind of oil is used at coronations? Certainly it cannot be olive oil, nor Macassar oil, nor castor oil, nor bear oil, nor train oil, nor cod liver oil. What then can it possibly be but sperm oil in its unmanufactured, unpolluted state, the sweetest of all oils? Think of that, ye loyal Britons. We whalemen supply your kings and queens with coronation stuff. This is the end of chapter 25. Now, I previously recorded this video and realized that I made a big mistake and did a grave disservice to one of the people who I mentioned. So I want to first get that out of the way. And what it was about oiling, and how a chapter says oiling, anointing the machinery with oil. So you have gears that go like this, and arms and levers and pins and all sorts of things where metal rubs against metal. And what they do, or what they used to do, now they have slightly better ways to do it, but a lot of it is still oiled, is they would put a little bit of oil in the pinholes and on the pins and on the gears and all the various different pieces that move and rub together. And what this does is it does a few things. One, oil is a good lubricant. It has a very low viscosity relative to a lot of things. So what happens is it makes easy for things to slide. So if you ever accidentally spill a little bit of oil on the kitchen floor, it becomes really easy to slip on it. Or if you have old wood furniture that gets polished with oil, then it becomes a very slippery surface. So it makes it easier for the gears to move about, the pins to move about. Another thing that it does is it keeps water and air out, because the oil binds tightly to the metal, and oil is hydrophobic, which means it keeps water away from things. It doesn't mix with water. And when water gets in, it causes the metal to rust and oxidize. And when metals oxidize, they swell up and get a little bit thicker. And because they get a little bit thicker, the parts that just meshed no longer mesh well, and it starts wearing away and eroding. So machinery is constantly covered with oil. They have modern ways to do it where they do fine ceramic coatings on things, but that's usually overkill, and it's usually just a good coating of oil. So even roller skates, you have the roller skates, you have the roller skate bearings. People who roller skate a lot will take the bearings out of their roller skates and just soak them in oil and get all the oil in there and work all the dirt out and then put the bearings back in. Anyway, when I was discussing this, I mentioned the phrase, the real McCoy. The real McCoy there was an inventor, Elijah McCoy. He was a Canadian. He was of African descent, so he was a black man. And he invented an oiling machine for railroad cars. So, you have the train engines and the steam engines and all of these pieces moving around and jostling. And he invented a gizmo that continuously fed oil into the gears in the places where it was needed. And there were a lot of people who had oiling machines that were okay, but his was just spot on. It had good flow, it had adjustable flow, it directed it at just the right place, it had a good reservoir for topping up. And so it was the real McCoy. And if you had these knockoffs that weren't as good, the cylinder would run dry, or it wouldn't put enough oil on and the parts would start rubbing, and you just have this whole mess. But Elijah McCoy came up with a good way to oil it. Now, another word in there was they talked about the hair oil and Macassar oil. Macassar oil was an invention in the late 1700s, 1800s, and it was very popular for men to go and slick back their hair. And this is one of those fashion things that comes and goes. Because for a while it was like, okay, we're going to have the white poofy wigs. Or we're going to have the hair oil. Or then we're going to have, we're going to have hair up again. Or we're going to have shaved heads. Or we're going to have shaving part and dyeing the top blue. So right now the big thing is bright colors and shaved sides or shaved parts. And it's like, okay, that's... And, back in the 50s, there were the greasers. The greasers had the hair slicked back. Or you had the rockers with hair up. So you had both fashions at the same time. Anyway, this hair oil was so popular in the 1800s. And it was called Macassar oil. It was so popular that there was a thing invented. It is kind of a doily that you sit on the back of a sofa to keep the hair oil from messing up the sofa. So this Macassar oil was so popular that they invented a thing called an Antimacassar that you still see even after the hair oil went away. You still see, up until like the 60s and 70s, you still see these doilies on the back of sofas and chairs, even though it has to do with the fashion that at that point had been out of style for 50, 100 years. But people did it even because. Now, the thing is that, as I said, you have the rockers who were very, had the slick back hair, but you have different cultures and different things that popular hair slick back. There was a movie made by Eddie Murphy who starred in it, helped write it. Probably his best movie is Coming to America. And his nemesis, not really a villain, because the guy isn't bad, he's just kind of a schlub. His nemesis has family money, and they made a product called Soul Glow, which was used to make the hair oily and shiny and kind of curly. And anyway, there was one great scene in the movie where he and his family are visiting the love interest, and they all get up, and you have these big oily spots on the back of the sofa. And it's like, this is a joke that is like 150 years old. Which is, it's kind of funny, but...
You can show her your spot on the sofa.
Lolly says I can show you my spot on the sofa. My spot on the sofa comes from me sitting here and sweating because the house is hot. But, anyway... I don't do hair oil. This is just like pulled back tight. Also, talks about fellow who palpably smells of the anointing. There are a lot of people who wear too much in the way of fragrances, and I am very sensitive to the smells. And fragrances get put into a whole bunch of things that really they have no business going into. It's funny, I can smell makeup. So just like face powder or all of that stuff that you don't think should have a smell, I can like smell it when somebody walks up. And when somebody has too much perfume on or too much body spray or whatever, my nose closes up and I can't breathe. And I mean, there have been times at work where I'm just like feeling sick because somebody walks by with too much stuff. And you could actually follow people by the smell sometimes, and it's not like body smell, it's the smell of the stuff that they put on, which is just like not good. So that's Macassar oil, Antimacassars, the real McCoy, and excellent engineering, dude. Sorry in my original video, which no one will ever see. I'm sorry I got your identity wrong, but anyway, that was a great invention. That's anointing. Oh, anointing oil. From what I understand, from what I've read, it's typically olive oil, but there's no reason why it has to be anything special. It's just that it gets blessed by a priest. And one of the reasons why there is a blessing for the King and Queen of England when they become coronate at their coronation, when they're crowned. The reason why there's a blessing for them is because, in addition to being leaders of the country, they have a role in the church. One of the titles of the King and Queen of England is Defender of the Faith, and they are the titular head of the Church of England. Very little actual power, but that is part of the name of it. And when Prince Charles married a divorcee a few years ago, there were some big questions about, hey, is he allowed to become king? Because not only is he divorced, well, actually, I guess it wasn't an issue that he was getting remarried after his divorce, because at the time of his remarriage, his wife was dead. But the question was would he be allowed to be the head of the Church of England if he was divorced? And the church frowns on divorce, so who knows? But right now, Elizabeth is queen. Charles is likely to be the next king, and probably William after that. And I can't remember who William's oldest is. Arthur? No. Charlie? I don't know. There's lots of them. Whole bunch of them in line. And that is chapter 25.